Hello, my name is Matthew Chan.
And I'm Tony Centavo.
Welcome to the latest episode of TurnKey Publishing. And Tony, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Matthew. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm really excited. As you know, I love doing these shows. I mean, it just gives us an opportunity to talk to so many people. And I always enjoy it. So this episode's no different.
It gives us a chance to hang out a little bit.
That is true. That is true. Ever since we've done the shows, we've been talking a little bit more. We got to hang out more. So that is a great side benefit.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we're always scattered all over the place. But anyway, enough of our social lives, right?
Well, I guess we can take that off camera. But I guess we'll get down to the matters at hand.
Okay. Well, in our previous episode, if you haven't watched it, you may want to revisit it. We spent a lot of time about my experiences of writing, if you recall, Tony.
Yes.
And you did a real good job of asking some very good questions. I mean, they were very deep questions that I really just kind of took for granted. And I think your goal was achieved in getting some of the more subtleties out of me.
I thought it was important because, again, there are a lot of reasons why people don't start writing, don't complete a project, those kind of things. And for somebody who's done it as many times as you have, You're right, you kind of lose some of that in just routine process.
Yes.
But when people don't have a process, I'm glad that we brought that to the surface and people could benefit from it.
Right. Well, today we're going to revisit the topic of writing, but not necessarily from our perspectives of writing. I wanted to sort of discuss it from my observations of others.
Okay.
And I also wanted to get your opinion on what you see in others. Okay? So the topic today is, what's the difference between writers versus publishers? Now, when I say that to you, Tony, what comes to your mind when I say that there are differences between writers versus publishers? Because a lot of people they think they're kind of one and the same, or there's a lot of overlap.
Okay. Well, Matthew, in my humble view, writers compose the content and publishers take it and turn it into the book and make it available for sale or for public consumption. And I know there's probably some other links in the chain between, but that will be my layman's answer to your question.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. Now, there's obviously a lot of subtleties, when you throw out a term like writing. I mean, it conjures up a lot of different ideas. And same thing with publishing. And I, as you know, because you've known me for a while, I mean, I take sort of a liberal approach to these things.
Yes.
And I break a lot of the established rules. So allow me to share some of my distinctions here.
Okay.
Now, the word publish, pub, I think of the word public. So if you're going to publish, the intent is to share it with the public.
Okay.
Now, writing to me is a task. It is fundamentally just a task. It's something you do. It's something we were taught young. Now, what we do with that skill is ultimately up to us. Now, and one of the things I want to bring up is I've noticed in writers, especially those that do it for like personal growth or spiritual reasons, like journaling, diaries, writing poetries, or writing stories for themselves, they are fundamentally not publishers, and a lot of them have a very, very difficult time getting out of writing mode. And they spend a lot of their time being very introspective.
Okay.
Now, as you know, Tony, you've already tackled this. Writing is not necessarily very exciting because it can be very solitary.
It is.
If you take the traditional approach.
Right.
But for these people who are somewhat introverted, again, these are broad generalizations, it is a very introverted activity and they enjoy it very much.
Well, I would take some of the different examples that you gave, I guess aside from people who write professionally. I would imagine that most people who actually write do it for leisure or because, as you said, the hobby gives them some artistic expression.
I agree.
A way of I guess, journaling their perspectives on things, no matter how they happen to share them. But
Right.
I would agree with that entirely.
Well, I would say to you, Tony, that because us as human beings, we all have an ego to some degree, and I tend to think that
some bigger than others.
Gee, I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay. Well, Let our viewers decide.
All right, but I do believe
Text
that
your vote to anyway.
I think inherently we as human beings need recognition.
Yes, yeah.
We would like recognition. I mean, quite frankly, look at what we're doing here. In a sense, this kind of works our egos, but the society benefits from that.
True.
Because we're doing this for free. If we waited till someone paid for us to do those shows, this show would have never gotten started.
I have to agree with that.
So
Yes.
your reward and my reward, at least at this time, is something more than financial. So anyway, going back to the writing for very personal reasons, I personally think that for a lot of these people, they keep it introverted because they're a little bit fearful of sharing it. Now, granted, there are some private thoughts that are never meant for anybody to read.
Right.
That I will grant. But I run into so many people, and the thing about it is I don't necessarily seek them out. Okay, they seek me out and they ask my opinions. They say, well, what do I think about the writing? And I'm thinking to myself, why would you even ask me that? Because I've got a publishing hat. Like, I got an email last night.
Okay.
And it was from this woman, and she wanted to share some works with me. So her claim is that she wants to keep it private, it's part of her growth mode and all that. I'm thinking, well, if it's a personal thing, why are you sharing it with me? And why does it even matter what my opinion is?
Well, maybe
you get what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I can only speculate what her motive was, but maybe she's, I guess, in transition, venturing into the shallows as far as wanting to take what had been private expression and
Yes.
making it something of for public consumption.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think she was running it by me to kind of get a feel, kind of like you said, just kind of get her tippy toe of what it might be like, to share it.
Yeah, because you're a publisher, so if you say, hey, 2 thumbs up, yeah, she keeps on going. If you do like in The Gladiator and go like that, she might decide to keep it to herself. So,
But see, Tony, this is why I get all worked up about this. Okay, look, we all have our opinions of our stuff. Okay, and of course we want somebody to like our work. Believe me. I'd be the first one to tell you, I want people to love my work. I'm just like anybody else. I don't like criticism. I don't like people saying, oh, you did a bad job and all that stuff. Okay, so I'm fundamentally the same. But what really works me up is it puts me in a very precarious position. So if the work is generally good, obviously it's not a big deal. I say, hey, good job, keep going. But what if I said, well, it wasn't so good?
Well, you'd be giving your honest answer. And then, too, I would include is how you address that. If you and she are engaged in a dialogue, as you just stated, you're not sure what her motive was in the grand scheme of things. But, I guess if it were me, I would ask that question, okay, in as much as you ask for my opinion, where do you want me to place my opinion? Is this entertaining? Does this have market value? I'm sure there are a lot of different things that you could address subject to what the purpose was for her sharing that information.
Well, I took it as, like you said, the tiptoeing, and now it turns out it was okay. Her work was somewhat okay. I thought it was a little unpolished. But, the first thing that jumped out at me is, okay, if I thought it was a bad job, are you going to, not do this? Mm-hmm. And you know me, I'm all about personal empowerment. Let's assume I didn't like it.
Okay.
Should that stop her from going forward?
No. I can't speak for her. I can only speak for me.
Right.
If, let's say I got a response back from you and you said, this was not so good. Maybe you use more colorful language. This sucks. I don't know.
No, I wouldn't say that. But
if you didn't give me some feedback on how to improve it, then my personality would say, okay, well, what would help to make it more consumable or better? Whatever the defect was, I want to get feedback so I can fix it. Now, I'm not going to go back and crawl into a cave and suck my thumb. Now, let's hope that she would not be of that inclination. But you're addressing the point that some people's egos, as we just addressed, are fragile. Mm-hmm. And I would also take that next step and say, but when someone takes it upon themselves to ask for feedback, they're probably doing it because they want to get better. Would you agree?
I'm not sure. In this particular case, I'm not sure. I don't know if she wanted me to perhaps publish her work. I don't think that was the case, but I think she was just kind of feeling out because I'm not in that genre she was writing, which was very inspirational, more motivational, that sort of thing.
Right.
And it was sort of on the realms of poetry. And so I make no bones about it. I don't ever tell people, look, I know I publish novels or anything like that. I am a business publisher. That's my specialty. In fact, Tony, I will go to so far as to say that I would not be necessarily a good coach for people who want to write. Because I think there's a certain finesse, like you. I think you're a great coach because you have that personality.
Thank you.
And for me, I just think I would hurt too many people's feelings because I'm very, I'm very results oriented.
Yeah.
And I do my best not to let the mental stuff stop me. I mean, I'm just like anybody else. I mean, I still get stuff, but I actively work on it to get past it. Now, without droning on and on, the point I'm trying to make is, and I'm just putting it out there as for the viewers to think about. If you are writing and you're asking for people's opinions, if they like it, fine, there's no problems there. But if someone says they don't like it, how will that affect you? I want you to think about it, and I want you to think about it. If even me, okay, Tony, I know you're in the process of writing a book. I say, Tony, I don't particularly like it.
Okay.
I would want for you, to say, you know what? Maybe I'll take some of the opinions into consideration, but I'm still going to push forward and finish it up. That's what I'm about.
Yeah, well, let me...
Versus letting it freeze you and all that stuff.
Well, let me address that to the viewers from the standpoint of what you said about coaching. Now, to the extent that I think the relationship is got to be one where there's a clear understanding of the benefit of the dialogue. Mm-hmm. So let's just say that I trust your opinion and you understand that I want to get published, then from the standpoint that you are a publisher and I, in this particular setting, are a writer, then yours is the bar or the mold that I would need to conform to if that is the nature of the relationship. Now, if you're a peer, another writer, and you gave me your opinion, then it would be a very different context. You see where I'm going with that? Mm-hmm. So to the extent that I think that someone has got to recognize what the feedback is representing to them and then take that in the right vein, because if it was a peer, I might go to another peer and see what that person thought. Mm-hmm. If it was a publisher, I might go to another publisher, but again, there's a difference in terms of someone looking at it from this writing perspective versus someone looking at it from the different angle that a publisher would view it. So in the particular instance of the woman who sent you the email, she was a writer asking for a publisher's opinion. And here's the other part of that. Mm-hmm. If someone's just being nice and saying, oh, that's nice, I like that. I always tell people, and I'm very serious about this in my own life in a lot of different areas, you learn very little when people tell you it was good, I liked it.
You know what? That is something about you. You do come from a military background. You kind of like that hard approach.
I do. I want to get better.
It's kind of, yeah.
And so when people challenge you, now they may be wrong or they may be uninformed, but at least I always tell people if I can stand up for why I did what I did, at least I have a clear construct as to my intentions. So if I need to be redirected, let's say the person was giving me very valid advice and recommendations, then I'm shifting toward an outcome that would be not only acceptable in terms of what I was pursuing, but also, I guess, to a broader market as we're talking about publishing. So again, I think people need to be very cautious of getting tacit agreement.
Yeah.
As much as they need to be cautious of not being withdrawn if they should get some type of resistance or objection.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tony. There is a certain balance. I mean, I expect that there's going to be criticisms and reactions, and I do take it to heart, and I do consider it, the merits and the cons, and from where people come from. Some people are just being mean. That's just, and there are other people, they have a different perspective, and you just kind of roll with it. Now, well, I'm going to move off of her real quick, but I do want to say that she, because she did she submitted some work to me. for me to read. The first set was okay. The second set, she sent it to me, something else to look at. So I'm thinking, okay, you already got, some feedback on the first set.
Right.
And so she's sending me a second set, and the second set, I felt a little differently. And I said to her, look, this is not my specialty, okay? These are just my impressions. And I said to her that, are you writing this to ultimately publish it, share it with somebody?
Right.
Because if you're writing it personally, it shouldn't matter what anybody thinks. It's meant to be kept to yourself, right? It shouldn't matter.
True. That is very true.
And I said to her, I just said to her that I think ultimately you will hurt yourself if you don't make the decision to just start sharing your work. And she didn't take it well.
Really?
Yeah, she didn't take it well because, well, she justified her decision how it was a personal thing. She was doing it for growth mode and all that stuff. And that's what kind of partially sparked this discussion, because it was that she started justifying her position. And I'm thinking, if you were truly doing it privately, you wouldn't have shared to begin with.
True.
Anyway.
It's confusing.
Right. So anyway, moving on to something similar. There's a lot of blogging that goes on the internet. And these people love to write. And actually, in a sense, blogging is a form of publishing.
Okay.
Except that blogging is much more forgiving. Blogging, it's actually fairly dynamic if you've ever read blogs. You can make multiple entries.
Right.
And if you make a mistake, you can actually go back in and correct it.
That's right.
Whereas book publishing is really a very unforgiving format. In many ways, I kind of look at it as like a balance sheet in finance terms, in that a book is like a snapshot. Whether you like it or not, when you write a book, as I did this way, it is a snapshot of what you have done up to that point, and you are committing to it without ever knowing in the future. And I think because of the snapshot effect, it really makes people very concerned. And it's especially bad in fast-moving industries.
I think that one of the things, we may have discussed it off camera, but I was telling you that in my past life as an intelligence officer, when we would have to render reports, you would always indicate the information cutoff.
Yes,
and
yes.
From
Bring
the
it up again.
standpoint that in the 1980s, when we didn't have internet technology and all that other stuff, the information we received wasn't coming in as fast, and so therefore, you're right, it will be a snapshot, but not that much would be changed between the time that it was received and ultimately published and rendered to, say, the commanders in the field when they needed to make their combat and battle decisions. But in the 90s, I would go to the Gulf War, where the beginning of technology, as we know it, much more robust nowadays. It was like we would be in the process of publishing the report, but then there's constantly information coming in, and you can't make when do you decide that, okay, this has got to go, knowing that we're leaving out stuff that by the time we republish the next report 12 hours from now, there may have been some critical elements. There was always a reviewing officer who had to make those kind of, okay, do we slide this in, as an amendment without having to go back and reshape, or do we have to kind of be late publishing to restructure the view that will be presented by the report. So you're right. Now we live in a dynamic, information is so dynamic nowadays.
And we're moving way faster. And
that's challenging.
it is an issue, and I do feel like it paralyzes a lot of people. Again, it is not my place to tell anybody where they should cut off. But ultimately, I know for a fact that if you want a hardcore product, there has to be a cutoff. You have to draw a line about when enough is enough and get it out.
Right.
Now, Tony, I think you know me well enough that I know how to exercise a certain discipline. I believe in turning things out.
You do.
Because having it rattle around in my head serves nobody. And you really don't get any feedback. I think, like you, I'd rather get my feedback from the marketplace and just put it out and just go from there. Because I view it as I can always update it. But anyway.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I know there are 4 books that come to mind that I own, where I have seen, and 2 of them I've actually gotten the revisited or revised that may have been 5 or maybe longer in being published after the original book hit the market. So I guess that is a response to what we're talking about. But how do you feel about that particular approach?
I like it. I mean, basically, there is no other way. Because I come from the computer industry, I look at it as like a software update. So if you get a revised edition, a second edition, I've bought second editions and third edition and revised editions. I don't really have a problem with it, especially in areas that are changing fairly quickly. There's just no way around it. If you want the latest information, you've got, in terms of book format, you got to buy it.
Right.
Or just settle for the fact that you bought the first edition 3 years ago and you can do without it. So it's an economic proposition. You just have to decide whether or not you want to spring for it.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess to the extent that in novels and things that are fiction, you don't have that, but
that's right.
In business books and things like that, especially things that would be impacted by technology, which is most things, or even changes in the economic conditions. And it's interesting, and I'll relate to bookstores, when I'm back in the heyday of the stock market, the shelves upon shelves of investment books. Then the heyday of real estate boom, shelves upon shelves of real estate investment books. Yeah. And now you go in there, and what was 4 racks is down to them sharing one.
Yeah, right.
And to the, but you don't necessarily see as many new books coming out that talk about the new dynamics in the marketplace, whereas I think that as these things have shifted, if I were a writer, I would say I would want to respond to, there's been a title shift, and here's how you do it now, because nothing stands still in the economic world anyway.
Well, it's every publisher, or if you're an author you're going to have to decide whether or not you're going to let the snapshot effect get to you or not. And I say you have to overcome it at some point. And of course, in the software business we call it feature creep. You're always sliding stuff in. Right. Oh, I want to slide it in. It's sort of like your story. What do we do with this new piece of information? Do we put it in addendum, or do we have to restructure it to kind of fit it in there? It is an issue of traditional book publishing. Now, in ebooks, it is a little bit more forgiving nowadays. You can actually update ebooks, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Well, let me ask one other question. Do you feel, as far as I just made the comment let's just use real estate, because things have changed so much.
Yeah.
Do you think that some authors feel that it would undermine their credibility when they were saying this is the way you do it? And
that's a very good question.
Come back and say, well, that ain't the way you do it now. This is the way you do it. You follow?
Yeah. You know what? It's funny you asked that, because I've actually thought about that. What I would say for me is that it's what I knew up to that point. Okay? I'm not a person that has to stand by till the day I die. We are about change. We're about growth. Things happen that will kind of shift the way you view things. And in my view, I think you roll along with it. Now, it is a little less forgiving. Obviously you put some things into print, and then later on you may have to recant some of it. And I would just be upfront about it. I think people are forgiving by nature. I think most people understand that this world continues to evolve.
Yes.
Circumstance. So I tend to think that people are they're going to be gracious about it. Yes, there's probably going to be a couple of hard nuts about it, saying, well, you wrote this 4 years ago and all that stuff. It's like, well, that's what I believed at the time. And so I don't really get wound up about 2 or 3 people. I think most people are forgiving, and they would understand if you started changing your context, as long as you were willing to be open about it and you explained why. That's the caveat. Yes. Don't just spring the change in opinion without any backing.
Well, I was just thinking about the volume of books, and from the standpoint, certain things, and I'm not harping on real estate for any particular reason, but that was very evident, and the fact that I would personally say that there's just a whole new way of doing things, that if people were to sustain a credible presence in that professional writing genre, that come back and readdress the things that they're following if you want to use that word, would want to hear about, as opposed to, just kind of fleeing the scene of the accident and, letting the cops sort it out, Anyway, that was just, you addressed the matter. But again, it goes along with the snapshot effect.
Okay.
So I guess we can
Now, as we
take
kind of
topic on
right,
here.
yeah, as we kind of wind down this episode, there is a very important story that I want to share, and I've told it to fairly few people. She was a fairly good friend of mine, and that I had met. Gosh, it would have been about 10 years now, and I think this was back in 2007. Okay, she had gotten cancer, and she fought it very hard. She blogged about it. She shared her story online, and she ultimately lost the battle and died. Now, it was actually, it was very sad, and there was a lot of people following that blog. I mean, obviously everyone was rooting for her.
Right.
But she'd be sharing the pictures and, of her decline. She'd be sharing how she felt, and all this stuff. And everybody was obviously interested, so that blog, started growing. And somewhere in that, even before the cancer had hit, I had known how she was very dynamic personality, very attractive, well-liked. I mean, certainly more well-liked than me. So she really had a lot going for her. She was very well-liked. She was very influential. But I could tell because of her interests. We've been to similar seminars.
Right,
we had
right,
similar
yeah.
books. I mean, you sort of recognize a kindred spirit. And she was actually doing way more writing publicly than me, in terms of like writing articles and so forth. And I said to her, look, I would be more than willing to help you out to publish this. Whatever you want to publish. I would have done it just for free.
Right.
To help her
Yes.
out. I mean, just give her, because she was a friend, and I would have guided her through the whole process. And she would always dismiss that, she had other things to do. And yet I knew, I would literally bet my life on it, that she had this inner desire to publish. And I think she was kind of stuck. She didn't know what she wanted to write about.
Right.
But I also think that there was an inner fear. Now, I'm not trying to be morbid here. There is a point to me telling the story. So as she got into the cancer, she was still writing. So I offered to reach out. I say, look, not to say that, things are going to turn bad, but I am willing to help put something out, just in case.
Mm-hmm.
You leave a legacy. I just think that she was well liked and all. I think someone would have wanted her, a piece of her.
I'm sure, yes.
Okay, and she just kind of, and this was, she had the cancer, but she was still in the healthier stages, and relatively healthy, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
She wasn't like disabled yet,
Mm-hmm.
and she dismissed it. And after that time, I sort of just gave up, because, if you're facing death's door, okay, or you get to a certain point, and if someone's reaching out to you, maybe I wasn't inspiring enough to her, I don't know. But ultimately, she went to her grave with nothing. Even her blog disappeared.
Right.
Now, actually, I still have her blog in my computer because I did care enough to at least cut and paste it.
Right.
Because I had found out they were going to shut it down altogether. So maybe I will go ahead and publish that one day.
Oh, okay.
But regardless,
Mm-hmm.
but for the here and now, she went to her grave. She was only 42 years old.
Wow.
And she never wrote. She literally went to her grave without releasing the book. And I would literally, and I don't say dramatic stuff lightly. I would literally bet my life she wanted a book. But there was something about within her, don't claim to know her, everything about her, but there was something that was holding her back to the end. Even though she was so popular, she had so many resources, and she had everything going for her. But she didn't do it. And so I would say, don't do that. That's a fairly dramatic story, but
is.
don't go to your grave.
It makes the point.
People do care. Okay, when there comes a certain point that people do want a piece of you, believe it or not. Now, unless you've just been a terrible human being. But I don't think so. I think most people have good qualities, and I think people would want a piece of you. And I think a book is an old-fashioned book. I'm not talking about an e-book. An e-book, I suppose, if you want to do it, that's fine. But there's just something about this. This will literally last decades.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I take really seriously, I take great peace in knowing that, God forbid, my life came to a screeching halt, that I did everything I could to produce, share my knowledge and, up to the point that, I left this earth. There would be something left behind.
Well, that's
So anyway,
incredible. Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't mean to break it down, but so what do you think about the taking the, going to your grave without releasing something?
Well, now that you said that, it makes me really want to hurry up and finish mine and come up with a few more titles. But on the serious side of things, you touched on the fact that, even speaking of someone else, we would love to have a legacy. I know my mom, we call her, she's got a room in the house we call her museum. Mm-hmm. She's got photos and artifacts that, my brothers and I and her travels and stuff like that. And, as you were making that comment, it's amazing the things that people who know someone can relate to them, an object. But a book is a complete set of thoughts. Mm-hmm. And even before I really knew you, after reading your book, I could relate to, you mentioned the kindred spirits, the turnkey investor, the intrepid way book, and that is something that I would certainly encourage everyone. I'm sure that you're viewing this because you have an interest in publishing, to follow Matthew's advice. And the moral of that story is, don't let that book that is within you go to the grave with you. Leave something behind, and it's great that people like you, Matthew, invest your time with people like myself and all those who are viewing to encourage that and let them know that, hey, you don't have the barriers. There's the way to get this done, and we're certainly here to share that with you.
So anyway, I know this episode went a little bit longer than I intended, but I definitely wanted to share that story, and I wanted to share it with you. And as you know, I don't typically in my mode talk about these types of stories.
Yes.
But sometimes I've learned that these kind of stories are about the only things that will get people to move, and be reflective. Because, I'm all about getting people to go do something. The world is better served for it.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So anyway, thank you for taking the time to view this episode, and thank you, Tony, for agreeing to discuss such a heavy topic here. We're going to do our best to avoid such episodes on a somber note, but it is what it is, and it is part of the reason that why I do what I do. So thank you for watching this episode, and we'll see you in our next episode.
See you.